In the spirit of reconciliation, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. I pay my respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island peoples today. Welcome to Totally Lit, the podcast celebrating reading, writing and creating literature. I'm your host, Kai Garvey. Thank you for listening. Courtney Pepinnell, welcome to Totally Lit.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Now, you have a new release coming out. Would you like to share what your new book is?
I do. So I'm finally shifting into, I guess, the world of fiction. My debut novel is called The Last Poem, and it follows a author or a poet. Her name is Ren, and unfortunately she loses her fiancé in a car accident. So she moves to a small town in Colorado where she joins a grief group and slowly begins to heal, learn about herself again, maybe finds new love, maybe. But, it's all about how, you can't run from what's happened and you can't escape your past. So it comes knocking.
Well, it's interesting that you can run away from anything, but you can't run away from yourself. So you
Absolutely.
find your same set of problems are still with you.
Absolutely. No matter where you are or where you go to. And I think that was one of the main or central kind of themes that I wanted to talk about in the novel. Obviously grief, but just this idea that you're one version of yourself and then you can become more versions along the way. And that's sort of what Ren learns through meeting these other characters as well. And learns that exactly what you just said, you can't outrun yourself or what's happened to you.
And how did you find, because you're an Aussie, setting it in an American setting?
Yeah, so I've been, really lucky in my career. I've been doing this now for about 10 years. So I started in poetry and I published a book called Pillow Thoughts, and that was picked up by a US publisher. And so I always joke, I really wanted to start with novels, and I kind of had an intention to do that. And then I randomly ended up in poetry, and I've sort of been there this whole time producing these poetry books. So I've been to the States quite a lot, and I've spent quite a lot of time over there, particularly Colorado. And so for me, when you're creating a story, I think place and setting is really important because you want people to be able to connect with the characters and connect with, the place that these characters, I suppose, are based in. So primarily my audience was from the US. And so I knew that I wanted to write a story there, but I also wanted, small town, cozy vibes, found family. That was really what I was aiming for. Yeah, but I love Colorado. I've been so many times, and there's just something about those mountains that I've had an amazing adventures there. So that's sort of why it drove me to choose my story to be there.
And is your main character an American or an Aussie going to the States?
American. They're all American characters sort of set in America. And I think, again, just because I've spent so much time over the last decade, going and traveling to the US, I've made, a lot of connections over there with friends, but also readers. But it's just been so cool to see, because I also have an Australian publisher for this book, I'm doing it in Australia and also in the US.
How much work did you need to do with the publisher around language and things like that, or did it come quite naturally to you?
I don't want to say so much, but, I think for me, and, this was something kind of funny that happened in that editing process where for some reason I would combine, American phrases with Australian phrases, or I would use shopping trolley, or I would just swap things around, and I would start something one way and end it in another. And you've got these editors sort of saying, she's mashing things kind of together, like, can you figure out what she's saying? And I genuinely just think it's because for the longest time with my poetry, obviously the spelling is all in US spelling, and just from me having been over there so much, it definitely has kind of, in a weird way, sort of changed my language even a little bit. I have friends here who will often say, you kind of use words that the Americans would use to
Mm.
explain something, and that to me is just wild because I've don't notice it at all. And it's just something that's like a little funny thing that I've picked up on, I suppose, from being so based over there, I guess, for so long.
Well, I think because we're so saturated with like an Americanized television in Australia, we do understand what Americans are referring to when they talk about something that we would call a different thing. But in the reverse, Americans aren't as exposed as much to our language on television, although Bluey, I think, is helping with
Yeah.
that.
I was just about
So it may be more difficult in the reverse for an American reader to read something that you may have Australianized, I guess.
Yeah, and I think for me, you know, moving, I suppose, I'm the kind of person that I have, a million ideas in my head at once and I want to do all sorts of things, but I really love the idea of eventually reversing it, like
Mm,
having an American character based in Australia, like just to
yeah.
have that kind of crossover so that you can sort of combine these worlds and these readerships. I think that would be really cool to do one day.
And when you're writing your character's dialogue in your head, are you doing that in an American accent?
I've never been asked that question before, actually. I don't think so. I think it gets to a point where, I have quite a logical way of writing, because I've been doing it for so long, and it becomes job. And I felt with this novel, I really wanted to tap back into the creativity and sit with the characters and, what are their personalities going to be like? Can I hear them in my mind? And I think in the beginning, I found it tricky, again, because I haven't written a novel in the longest time. But towards the end, I think definitely I started to have these thoughts and feelings of, maybe you think about asking a question to one of your characters and you have to sort of say, oh, wait, no, they exist in my head. Like, I can't just go ask Henry what his latest book recommendation would be because he's a librarian. You have to sort of pull back. And I think that that's such an interesting thing that happens or can happen to authors and writers and creatives, that they get to a point where these characters feel like they're real, you know?
Mm, mm. And it's amazing too how times change as well. So we're also writing and having to keep up with like technology and like I have a character who originally I was having her work in a DVD shop. And it's taken I've been working on this manuscript for so many years now that DVD shops don't exist anymore. And I'm like, I'm gonna have to either rewrite it so it's set in the 90s or update what she'll be doing now. I really need to get myself motoring on this
Yeah,
manuscript.
that's still cool
It'll
though.
be in the future.
Yeah, but I love like the video stores, and you'd go and you'd pick what video or DVD you were gonna
Mm,
rent for it was so, like, it was fun going to the video store, so I think that would still be a fun thing to
mm.
write about.
Now, you're a poet yourself. How much of yourself is embedded in your novel?
The very beginning of my career, I mean, I worked in insurance before all of this, so I really fell into this. And the success of Pillow Thoughts, I never would have in my wildest dreams expected it to sort of, go off like that. So in the beginning, I want to say that, so much of it was about me and my thoughts and feelings and my expression and the way that I would heal, and how that, other people, I guess, would relate to that. And then it really became about the readers, I suppose, because as I went along, I would get all these beautiful messages. And I mean, still to this day, I get so many wonderful messages. So I do tend to take a lot of the inspiration from my readers and try to sort of write bits of them in the characters and through the story in the hopes that they'll pick up the story and they'll read it and they'll think back to, oh, I wrote Courtney that letter back in 5 years ago, and now she's put bits of me in her story and in her poetry.
Oh, that's
So
nice.
yeah, so I think there is a lot of me in it, but there's also a lot of, my readers and I suppose the people around me that inspire me. And, you know, it was all about how do I make this, I suppose, transition or journey into this chapter without sort of it being too jarring for a poetry reader that's always known me as a poet and known these poetry books, and all of a sudden I'm releasing a novel. I was like, how do I do that and bring them with me? And the easiest answer was just to write about a poet.
Mhm.
So that was really one of the reasons why I chose Ren to be a poet.
And the exploration of grief in the novel, is that from your own experiences as well, or is that something to drive the plot?
I would say so. Ren's fiance passing away. No, that isn't something that's happened in my life. It was mainly to drive the plot and give, I suppose, Ren a reason to, you know, look for Lucy. In the Lucy would give her coasters and things without giving too much away. She would give her coasters. So Ren goes looking for her. So for me, though, grief, I'm not a stranger to grief or writing about grief. A lot of my poetry talks about grief and heartache and challenges and hardships and how we can move through that. Not necessarily, I suppose, get over it, because I don't think that we just get over grief. I think that it's more about how do we learn to exist alongside it.
Mm.
So I think for me, grief, I'm not a stranger to writing about it. I understand heartache. I've had, some big heartaches in my life. But yeah, Lucy and that kind of, yeah, it was more to drive Ren to do what she needed to do.
I don't write poetry, but I kind of write creative nonfiction, I guess would be the best way. So things that are usually under 500 words that are a little narrative, and they all seem to be about grief.
Yeah.
So I'm in the future, like when I have enough of these for an anthology, that's probably something I'd like to do with those. But I do love the way that you can explore your own feelings and process your thoughts while you're writing. Is that with your poetry, especially, how much of your poems are fiction and non-fiction, I guess?
It's hard because you experience heartache, and just because you're able to move through it and move on with your life, like break up with someone and then you sort of move on, you're with someone new, what have you. You're not necessarily grieving that previous person for, I suppose, the rest of your life if you sort of moved on into a new relationship, but you have memories of what that felt like. And so I think for me, when I'm revisiting the way that I want to talk about heartbreak in a poem, I sort of go back and I remember the way that I felt. And it is hard. I'm getting married in like 3 weeks. So
Oh, congratulations.
thanks. I'm in like happy la la land. And so for me to go and then write something about grief, or, write a poem about, heartbreak, or something like that. Like, I'm obviously in love and happy. So I suppose it's almost like getting in character in a way, because you have to go back and remember what those feelings felt like. But at the core, these poetry books have stemmed from something that I needed to share and something that I needed to heal from. So I've written every single one because there was something that I wanted to say, but also in the hopes that for anyone else in a similar position, they'd pick up the book and it would be able to help them in some way, or they'd be able to relate to it.
Now, you mentioned that you were in insurance, and in a past life, I was in insurance as well.
Oh.
How did you transition from that world of corporate insurance stuff to becoming a poet? Like, did you always want to be a writer from a young age? How did you go from, I've written a poem, I'm going to share it with the world, oh, now I have a book of poetry?
Yeah, it's very different. But I always knew I wanted to be a writer, when I was younger. I was in a creative writing class, and I'll never forget the teacher's name. Her name is Jan Tolley, and she was the sweetest woman. She was so encouraging, and she would often tell me, your writing is really lyrical, and no one had ever really described my writing to me like that before. But I was very young. I was still a kid. I was in high school. So, when I moved on from high school, I did have thoughts about maybe going into journalism. I did media and communications for a little bit, but nothing was really sticking. I think I was at a point in my life where I wanted to travel. I had a job as I was doing club photography, so I was working in insurance, but then I'd go out to all hours for my club photography gig. So I was living sort of a very kind of young life, I suppose. I was just living life, and I didn't have, I suppose, the diligence to really look into how do I become an author, until eventually I started looking into, I think it was right around the time that Amazon was starting like the self-publishing kind of thing, and that was gaining traction and people were talking more and more about it. So I just started looking into it. I also had a blog. I was a Tumblr girly back in the day. And I used to blog and write some of my thoughts and things there, and people would sort of always say, "Oh, if you put this in a book, I'd buy it." So there were always like thoughts sort of churning. I used to write fan fiction about Glee and the same thing.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So there were all these people in, and I was so young, like I was in my early 20s, but there were people offering me this encouragement. So there was always this idea at the back of my mind, hey, maybe you should just give it a shot because people have been so kind and encouraging. Just take a chance. So I ended up self-publishing a couple of novels that were fine. Like they were fine because I think I'd built up that audience on Tumblr, so I had an audience, I guess, to kind of market to. But Pillow Thoughts was different because I didn't realize that poetry had this, I guess, resurgence, or it's like a modern take in the US, like with Milk and Honey, Rupi Kaur. I didn't realize that that was happening. So for me, I think one of the biggest reasons I published Pillow Thoughts is I was impatient because I was like, oh, I'm going to have to write another novel now when I can just release this,
Yep.
quickly kind of thing. And I also I'm queer, and I wanted to find a book that, I could write love poetry for others like me. So I really just kind of put it all together. I wanted a playlist of feelings that, you could just pick up this book. Hey, if you're feeling sad, read this section. But if if you're thinking about someone, read this section and send them little poems that you're thinking about them. And then, yeah, I just called it Pillow Thoughts, and I threw it up on the internet, and, it took off. And I suppose in those days, something going viral, I guess, had, these enormous ripple effects. So, and that's kind of what happened to me. So, yeah, it's been a super wild journey, and just interesting that Pillow Thoughts turns 10 next year. So it's 10
Oh,
years.
wow.
Yeah, so it's like it's been a decade, and it's just so interesting to me that, I'm kind of shifting into this new,
Mm.
it's like a chapter. It's like literally like one of my poems talking about, new chapters. It's like that for me. I'm living it.
Did it blow your mind when things were going viral?
Yes. Yes. I mean, I didn't even have, I still don't, it's not called Twitter anymore. X, I think it's, yeah, but when it was
Yeah.
called Twitter, I didn't even have that. And, I had I think my Instagram was on private. I think it started from Tumblr and it just kind of went off, and then it went on to Instagram, and then it went on to Twitter, and then it was just everywhere. And for me, as somebody who, was still working in insurance and had had no taste of anything like this, had no, I'd never been part of the publishing world or anything like that. So, yeah, it definitely blew my mind. But back to what you were saying, how different is it from working in corporate to being an author?
Mm.
Obviously, I'm so grateful and lucky, and I wouldn't trade this for anything. Like, this is what I want to be doing, and I've had the most amazing experiences, and I feel so blessed. But I think what some people don't realize is, sometimes being an author can be quite isolating, because I know for myself, I spend so much of my time sort of sitting in front of my computer, sort of writing away, and a lot of the relationships I suppose you cultivate with other authors or readers, it can be sort of online based. Whereas, when I was working in insurance, I had like a team of people, and we'd go out for like girls' lunches, and we like, we'd do all this stuff together. So I think that's been interesting, and probably one of the reasons that I've absolutely loved being, I suppose, having an Australian publisher now, because I'm able to go to Australian events, and not just for myself. I'm able to go to other events for, debut authors. And I was at the Manly Writers Festival last week, and I met, some wonderful authors, and they all have these sort of groups that you can be part of for support, and you go along and support each other. And I think that that is so important, to feel that sense of community, because yeah, I have for the most part, sort of been dealing with my team in the US, but I'm over here on the time zones that we were talking about before.
How have you found the difference, like when you were, I guess self-publishing, would you call it? It's not
Yeah.
quite that way when you're putting it out on the internet, but now that you've got a more traditional publishing arrangement, how is that feeling for you?
Yeah, I think I'm probably using old school terminology for it. I think it's more like I think it's indie authors now, is I think
Mhm.
it's proper term. Uh, but I think for me, I have a lot of people, definitely a lot of poets come to me, sort of ask, what do I do? I've tried to submit this to a traditional publisher, and I haven't received a response, or whatever it may be. And I think, there's nothing wrong with doing it yourself, or at least like doing the first couple yourself, because you learn so much. And
Yeah.
for me, that idea of, learning about how to format a book, learning about, everything that goes into a cover, and how much, artists and illustrators, and we need to appreciate them. We need to appreciate editors. Like, the book isn't created, it's created by a team, and there's so many
Mm.
people across all these different industries in the arts and the creative world, that, we really need to kind of be supporting each other. So I do yeah, I think it's great to help you learn the process. And sure, obviously with traditional publishing, you've got a bigger team behind you, and there's, I suppose, different opportunities that they can
Mm.
create for you. And you're working alongside people who have worked, sometimes these people have worked in the industry for years and years and years and years, so they might have, a different take or different advice that you can kind of learn from. But I'm definitely the kind of person that, and I don't know, maybe I'm a Libra and I like to balance everything, so I definitely see, the positives of both sides. I think that there can be space for both. Just like in the bookstore world, we have to keep supporting our independent bookstores. We
Mhm.
have to support our libraries. Yes, we have, Amazon and major retailers and all of these things, but I think that we just need to find space for everyone to exist. And I said this to my publicist the other day. I was like, we need to get behind bookstores, because a world without bookstores would be no world at all. Like, it just wouldn't be great. So, yeah, I think that I'm just the kind of person I like to think about how can we make space for everyone?
Yeah. Well, because everybody deserves a voice as
Yeah.
well. And the challenge is you can have written something beautiful and it will just continue to get rejected if it's just not the right in if the publisher is looking at it, I'm not sure if I can sell that, we'll pass on that. Or it could be for a myriad of reasons that it doesn't get across the line. But then that beautiful piece of work just sits without anyone getting the opportunity to read it. So I haven't taken the leap into any self-publishing yet, mainly because I'm like, that's going to be a project and I need time to learn how to do all of that. It was great to put out a book where like everything was done for me.
Yeah,
And
that's
I'm like, that's what I need. I need
yeah.
support.
I'm kind of the same way. I actually just recently I went back and just because I had, readers, they're sort of saying, "Oh, like, can you extend?" I had an old poetry book that I self-published, years and years ago called Hope in the Morning. And, it was such a short book, and I had readers being like, "Oh, why don't you just go and like extend that or add more poems to it?" And, I had like maybe a spare weekend. Obviously I'm so far removed from how much work it actually takes. I'm like, "Oh yeah, that'll be fine. Like, let me just have a look, see what I can do." This project, like, took me more than a month. I had to go in and, like, figure out and everything's changed. I had no idea what I was doing, and honestly, by the time I got to the end of that and, like, I, uploaded everything again, I just sat there and I was like, "Yeah, my newfound I need to, yeah, remember to go thank, my editors and my formatters and whoever else works on these things," because just the amount of time that it took for me to do it myself.
Yes.
I'd completely forgotten. It's such a project, such a project.
How did you find the difference between writing poetry and then moving to a long form novel? Did you because I write things short, sharp, and succinct. And I'm like, oh, I have to remember that there's scenery and
Yeah, I know. I mean, it was hard. I'm not gonna lie, it was so hard. I think I think for me, you can kind of see and that's also another interesting thing for me because I've got so many poetry books out there. I think there's something like 14 or 15 of them, but you can see over the years how they have slowly gotten longer and longer and longer, and I'm, shifting into more of that prose style kind of storytelling. Like, I can really see how I was sort of shifting and almost like, underneath it all and my heart is sort of saying that, you wanna go back to novels or you wanna do that, that's what you wanna do. So, I was definitely moving in that direction, but for sure, character development and even dialogue, and my book is set from 4 different points of view. So, to go in and create these characters and create these personalities for 4 different people from, they're all dealing with different types of grief. They've all got their own lives. Sure, they live in the same town and they're all part of the same grief group and they're friends, but to have them all be different so that on page it comes across as the reader is reading, "Oh yeah, Henry's back and I know that it's Henry," or you know what I mean? And there was certain points where in the arc, like when they sent out the advance copies to different readers and things like that, I was still actually tweaking the book. The art came out so early, and I was still tweaking the book and still, like, making little changes, and one person came back to me, and so they'd left this beautiful review, but at the end, they were like, right at the end, Emerson did something that I don't think Emerson would do, and I'd actually changed it because I recognized that Emerson wouldn't have done that either. And I just found that so, yeah, humbling because I was like, "You can see this character for who she is and how I've written her, and you're sort of telling me she wouldn't do that, and I can see it too." And so it was just amazing to sort of have somebody tell me that.
Mm.
But yeah, and that's what I mean. The level of that and the level that you go into is very different. Not to say that poetry isn't as, I suppose, you put everything into poetry as well.
Mm.
And I've said this before, one of my most favorite things about poetry is you can tell a whole story in one line. And I think
Yes.
that is so powerful. So yeah, very, very different, but both both enjoyable. I love both.
And poetry, it resonates through the ages because, like, you can say one line from a poem and people will know what you're talking. Somebody can write a beautiful line and it can last hundreds of years. But yeah, there are phrases in our everyday language now that have come from Shakespeare or some of the 18th century poets that it's like, oh, isn't that they've touched us from centuries ago.
Yeah,
Oh, it's amazing.
it is. It's so cool. And even, with, I suppose, there were so many different names for it, like pop poetry or modern poet. I don't even know what we're calling it these days. But just to see, like, yeah, there were differences, but I think that modern poetry, and when it had that, sort of resurgence, it was so great to see that maybe people who would never have normally connected with traditional style poetry, or never read it in school or didn't kind of want to, they were connecting with these newer books and then going back and reading
Mm,
more traditional poetry. And I just thought, it's so great that we can just kind of, have room for it all and notice that, yes, language, I suppose, has changed, in the modern world, but the feelings, when you're writing about love, people 100, 200 years ago, you're
mm,
still feeling that love. You're feeling the same, even if you've got a different language or you're explaining it in a different way, they're feeling it like you
mm.
are, 200
Yeah,
years later.
it's incredible how our words and the thoughts in our head, we put them on the page, and I think I've said this to other authors in the past as well, is that we can transfer our emotions to another person.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's
Yeah, it
magic.
really is. It really is. It really is.
Now, I have some questions for you that are just getting to know you kind of questions for your readers and my listeners. Do you have one tip that you would share with an aspiring creative that would like to get into your genre of writing?
Yes, and I'm gonna pull from one of my favorite authors, Jodi Picoult. I don't know whether I'm saying her surname correctly. Yeah, surnames are not but Jodi, there's a quote by Jodi, and she talks about how, you know, if you have a page of writing, you can always edit it, but you can't edit a blank page. And that stayed with me, for all my life because it's so true. I think a lot of creatives, particularly writers, there's a lot of self-doubt and there's a lot of, you compare yourself to other writers, and I think that stops you from being creative, or tapping into your individual creativity. So yeah, I think that just write it down because you can always edit it later, even if you look at it and they're sitting there thinking, "Ah, this isn't great," It's there and it can evolve from that point.
Can you tell me one surprising thing about yourself that your readers and other writers may not know about you?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. I'm pretty open book. I love anime.
Cool.
Studio, I think it's Ghibli. I say Ghibli, but again, I'm always
I say Ghibli,
okay,
but I
cool.
think it may be Ghibli.
Yeah, it's that American versus Australian way of pronouncing things. Yeah, Howl's Moving Castle, Kiki's Delivery Service, Spirited Away. I mean, all
Mm.
those. I absolutely love them, and I suppose, yeah, it's definitely inspired some of the poetry artworks that I've done through my career. But yeah, I am a big anime fan.
We are an anime house here, so I have a husband and two sons who are totally into it. I'm kind of supportive, so maybe anime adjacent. Uh,
Oh, you have to get behind it, and then you get all the plush toys everywhere and the figurines and the phone cases. It's just so cute. It's cute.
if we went back to young Courtney, primary school, high school Courtney, what would she be thinking about your writing career now?
She would be terrified of all the public speaking that I had
Mhm.
to do. She would be confused over why I'm suddenly afraid of flying because we were not afraid
Oh
when
no,
but I'm terrified of flying these days. Although, to be fair, I've been in near, yeah, some bad plane
there's
situations.
reasons why.
There's reasons why, so I get it, but yeah, it's an annoying fear to have. But yeah, I think that she would honestly probably be like, "Wow, you actually got out of your own way," because I was
Mm,
so shy and introverted as a kid, and I can still be quite introverted and reserved. I think I get that from my dad, actually, he's pretty reserved. But, yeah, I think I've somehow along the way sort of learned that, yeah, you might be afraid, but if you let that fear stand in front of you, you're never gonna go anywhere. So,
mm.
I think that she would be proud that I told fear to step aside and go out and live in the world and achieve everything I wanted to achieve.
I don't think introversion is a bad thing necessarily either. Like, I think you just need to embrace who you are, and it's something I'm a little bit older than you, Courtney, but something I've really had to learn because I hate public speaking. My hands shake, my
Yeah.
lips quiver. I certainly would have never expected to be a podcaster in terms of I'm very quiet. I'll be at the side of the room. I'm I guess an internal processor. So yeah,
Same.
I don't blurt everything out that comes into my head. I'll go away and think on things.
Yep, I can relate.
So my energy that I put out into the world is quiet and
Yeah.
soft. And I don't know why, but that seems people seem to equate that with being maybe weak or less interesting. And I'm like, I'm really interesting actually, and I am heaps of fun when I get a few drinks into me. Um, but it's interesting that the opposite of an extrovert who will maybe walk into the room, dominate the room, talk over the top of you, or but that's accepted as more acceptably sociable
Yeah.
behavior. I'm stumbling over my words now. Like, but I think there's room for everyone. Like we complement each other
Yeah.
by having, some people who are like cheerleaders and loud, and then others who are supportive but quietly in the background.
Yeah, I no, I do agree with that, and honestly, I suppose the older I get and the more that I reflect and like what I was saying with my poetry books, how you could see maybe my writing style kind of evolving. You can also see the way that I think evolving as well, and I think that that's just come with age and some of the experiences that I've had. I've had some not great relationships, pretty toxic and abusive, and now, I've finally, found a beautiful partner that is genuine and kind and, treats me with, I suppose, respect and has helped
Mm,
me, I guess, flourish, I suppose, and understand who I am in the world. So I am less, I don't think of myself as, I guess, plain anymore because I used to think that a lot. I was taught in some of these previous relationships that I was plain and quiet and boring, but I don't think so much about like that way about myself anymore as I'm sort of, trooping along, I suppose.
yeah,
So yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think, yeah, quiet and soft is not a weakness. I think
no. And it
those
takes a lot of bravery to overcome your
fears as well. Like if you are not confident walking into a room full of people, but you make yourself do it anyway, it's a lot. And I find there's times I'm like, just go and walk away for a minute. I'm okay. Go back out again. And I don't really understand. That's one thing I'm still kind of exploring is about, oh, where does that fear initiate from? Because I am in a room full of people that like me and care for me. So why does that feeling still sit with me? But yeah, that's probably something my psychologist and I need to
I
chat.
was gonna say maybe, yeah. I was like, "I'm gonna ask that question to my therapist." But I would agree with that. It's like, where does it come from? Where did it start? What happened? You know, you almost wish you had like I don't know, a time machine or something that you could go back and pinpoint, you know, because I think every person they always talk about the fork in the road or that defining moment where you made one choice and it kind of altered everything kind of thing, you know? So, yeah, it's almost like you wanna replay it almost like a bit of a movie to see, well, when did that kinda happen?
Mm.
It's very interesting.
It is wonderful when you find your person though, and that they see you, like they understand you and get you. Like it makes a total difference to your world.
Abs
When I was originally writing, I would be with partners where I'd get an assignment back. I'm like, oh, I got an HT on that. I'm so proud. And they're like, okay, that silly little thing that you're doing a university subject for it. Like they would think that I was nuts. And yeah, meeting my partner who is now my husband, and he was like, yeah, you can do this. It's
Yeah,
great. And like being supportive, although we have an issue where he tells me something's great, and I'm like, "Are you telling me it's great just because you want to please me, or is it good? I wanna know it's good."
I'm the same way. I'm like and I'm yeah, my editors, bless them because I think they've learnt to be, you know, be able to say in a really constructive way, like how we can kind of make it a collaboration instead of me, you know, being like, guys, just rip me to shreds now because I'd rather you do it than it be like whatever on the internet. And they're sort of sitting there being like, well, we're not going to like tear strips off you because that's
Mm,
professional. But yeah, I'm definitely the same, you know, if I give various pieces of writing to my partner Claire, and I'm like, you know, I want the honest feedback, and I'm very lucky because you know she's a huge reader. Like, you know, she reads, yeah, just pumps the books out like there's no tomorrow. So and just loves it, loves reading, and I'm lucky because I will get that honest feedback from someone who has read, you know, wide range of
mm,
genres and authors and things like that. So I am lucky that I have that.
amazing. And I'm really pleased to hear you guys are getting married. It's coming up soon.
Oh, it's so soon. It's like 3 weeks away.
I love a good wedding. Thank you so much for joining me and being so candid. I pride myself on asking questions that nobody else asked.
Yeah, no, you did. Yeah, I get that.
But it is a bit naughty that I don't hear anyone. I am gonna have to change up my questions a bit though, because I know if any authors listen, they'll be ready now because they know what I'll be asking.
You're gonna be taking those notes. Taking those notes. No, that was
Yeah,
great. I really appreciate it.
so it's lovely to chat with you. And I'm based in Brisbane. Are you doing any launch events or anything up our way?
The goal is yes. I mean, obviously, I'd love to come up and, you know, go to the bookstores. I think I've started and, you know, I think the biggest issue for me is I'm so busy, but I really want to do, you know, like a little bookstore series. So I have done a couple where I've gone down south. So I'm sort of based in Wollongong. So I've gone down south to, you know, Kiama and
Mm.
Southern Highlands and different things like that and visited some of the bookstores around there. But the goal ultimately would be to do that in, you know, various states across the country because, you know, people send me photos of the book in all different sorts of spots.
Yes,
So
that's
I'd
fun.
love to get there. So yes, if I do anything up your way, I'll let you know.
I'll make sure I keep an eye out. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Courtney, for your time and sharing your journey with my listeners.
Thank you. It was so nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Totally Lit is an independent podcast. You can help support us to continue to chat with wonderful Australian creatives by leaving a review on iTunes or sharing our socials with your friends. You can also make a contribution at www.buymeacoffee.com/Totally Lit. This will also help with equipment and podcasting platform fees. I love to interact with our listeners, so feel free to say hello either by email or social media at totallylitpodcast@gmail.com, or you can find me on Facebook, Insta, LinkedIn and Twitter, and now Blue Sky. I've also created a group on Facebook called the Totally Lit Writing Community. It's a space to continue the conversation and share your writing successes, events, launches and latest projects. Jump into the group and say hello. Thank you for listening to Totally Lit, and don't forget to go out into the world to read, write, create, ignite.